Hey everybody, what is going on? I am Maximus Rex and this is Big Baby Reviews. Today is Friday, so we're moving on with our new artist reviews on Friday with Greg Capullo. Gotta be honest, right off the bat, this Quasar run, I much prefer, and I discovered Capullo when he was on Spawn, and once he kind of got running on that title, he was doing some awesome stuff. Not that his artwork's necessarily horrible in this, but man, the story overall and just the characters, it's quite a slog. I would never, other than the fact that there's Greg Capullo art here, never would have bought these, never would have read these. Back in the day, just because it was Quasar and it's not quite Capullo at his height yet and he's still starting out, probably would not have even had a second thought about buying this. But again, the interest here is to see Greg Capullo early on in his career. And that's about it. So this might be a fairly short review because, man, I'm going to focus on the good stuff in this book and just kind of flash through a lot of the boring kind of Marvel 80s style storytelling. Pretty decent cover. We're going to get into parts with Quasar, the more cosmic parts we'll have in this issue and later on when the art starts to get a little bit more refined. There will be a change in inker as well. I don't think that the current inker that starts off with Greg Capullo is actually helping them out much in the art department. They're just not gelling together well. Sometimes inkers don't exactly follow what the penciler does, but makes the artwork still kind of shine and kind of create something new. Here, I feel like the inker's almost working a little bit against Greg Capullo because I do see a lot of the potential in his artwork that we see in later issues like on X-Force and on Spawn and stuff. It just feels like the inker is not well suited to bringing that out so much. So we'll talk about who that is in the credits. So like I said, pretty alright cover. Not anything that would have gotten my attention back in the day though. So we start with a pretty cool splash page, right? And very cosmic kind of character with the stars and stuff fading from the background into his being. It's kind of a overused trope by now, but in the early 90s, I don't know that many people had done that. Only Eternity, I think, was kind of shaped that way. Is this Eternity? I don't think so because I don't see, it says his name is Chronos, so that clues me in. And also it's not quite Eternity's design here. So Mark Grunewald is the writer, Greg Capullo is the penciler, Keith Williams the inker. And Keith Williams, on other artists, I think does a great job. Just not someone who gels well with Greg Capullo. And later on the Quasar series, they'll get a second inker. Is his name Candelario or something? Anyways, when we get there, and I'll point it out, I do think he does a much better job on the kind of stuff that Greg Capullo is laying down for this series. Janice Chang is the letterer, and Paul Becton is the colorist. So when it comes to this whole sequence with Chronos, we see Thanos here, right? Because we're pretty darn in and around Infinity Gauntlet, or it's just around the corner. It's about to happen. But all this cosmic stuff, I think, works really well. But let's be honest, as an artist, having to draw this stuff, which is much more abstract and kind of textural, I guess you could say, is I don't want to say easy, but probably less time consuming than having to do perspective and draw cars and all the regular kind of, stuff you would see in just a regular human scene. But I think Greg Capullo does a pretty darn good job here. As for the stars, like I said, I think that's probably more the inker, and I feel like it could have been a little bit more precise. Just in some of these shots, it just feels like he quickly dashed it out and could have been filled up much more than what is actually here on the page. So the star inking, probably using white medium, I feel is a little haphazard and just kind of thrown down. So these scenes are still kind of interesting, right? We got like these cosmic beings just kind of hanging out, I guess, all these kind of cosmic superhero characters in some sort of space station or something. And, Doctor Strange is there. We get to see, Capullo's interpretation of him at this time. But yeah, you can see just even in the finishing of the inking, it's like a lot of contour work. There's not a lot of hatching. There's not a lot of definition. It's a pretty simplified Capullo kind of look. Even though, like, when I look at some of these farther away shots, I feel like this is almost closer to what Capullo would do later on, just in the way he composes and builds faces. Better example than, say, what he's doing here. Maybe trying to just be too realistic here and it's not quite working out. There's some interesting sequences again, like this whole part where, Strange sees kind of just half of everyone's body, just kind of some interesting surrealist elements, and you get it from a different angle here. And I'll give him this kind of a worm's eye shot. So, to go from that side to this side, keep it fairly consistent with the storytelling and everything, not an easy task. And then, like I said, when there's magic or cosmic stuff involved, it does get a little more interesting with these Quasar throwing out like bunchy kind of strings that they can hang on to and follow him. Just, yeah, there's some weird stuff here for someone back in the day who, like me, who would have been into Image Comics, but, you know, maybe not at this point when he's doing this, but Image Comics are definitely in around the corner. What's the date on this again? 1990. Yeah, so we're pretty darn close. I mean, this is still pre-Image artwork, right? Image has, I mean, those Image guys are there, Jim Lee, and that style, that 90s style has started to affect other artists and stuff. I could see certain aspects of it here, but I would say that Greg Capullo is probably still working in a fairly kind of Marvel house style, how to draw comics the Marvel way kind of thing here, right? So, you know, in shots like this, I just feel like there's just so much detail left out. It's so simplified. It's almost like Hanna-Barbera cartoons or something in some of these shots, and, you know, not the Greg Capullo we're going to get to know later on. Here, though, I definitely think it's a good example of Greg Capullo's great compositional skills, right? This whole splash page, Jack of Hearts, right? His head kind of popping out there. Just an interesting little detail that adds extra layer and is a bit of an Image kind of thing. Not that they were the only ones doing it, but it wasn't quite as widespread and codified in 1990. But yeah, so to me, you know, put a totally different inker on this, and this page looks way better. There's something with the inking that just simplifies Capullo's stuff, where again I see his compositional skills, his foreshortening skills, but the aesthetic just doesn't work at all for me, and that's again being laid down by the inker. The story going on in this comic, I'm just really not interested in. None of this piques my interest, right? And just lots of panels and lots of dialogue. You know, really, this, when I turn to these pages, I feel like I'm reading like a mid-80s Marvel comic, and I was just never into that. You know, find fault with me, but I was introduced to comics with those exciting kind of Image style artists right before they went off to Image when they were doing stuff for Marvel, and that to me is what Marvel comics are, and Image comics are an even more heightened version of that style, right? But yeah, I just can't go back and get used to, you know, anytime I look at mid-80s Marvel stuff, unless it's a really good storyline or a really great artist, I just find it very mundane. And these two pages to me are kind of indicative of that. Even just, we've got a bird's eye view, a down shot that's very well done here. That's probably the most interesting thing on both of these pages here. And then we just get more of these. So all I can really talk about here is very adequate levels of background, very good establishing shot here. The apartment, this one too, right? The kind of loft bed kind of idea, New York apartment. I assume we're in New York, right? It's a Marvel comic. I could be wrong. But other than that, just nothing to say about these pages. Nothing interesting. And it definitely seems like a more writer-driven book at this point than an artist-driven book, right? I can't imagine either that Quasar was like one of Marvel's best sellers either. So yeah, basically what this is looking at Greg Capullo kind of doing, you know, a jobber comic. Just doing a mundane Marvel house style job, not rocking the boat too much. So again, if I had seen this back in the day, don't know that I would have been that interested in it, other than the fact that it's Quasar, but even in just the artwork. The inking to me is really killing a lot of what makes Capullo great. Compositions are still good, storytelling is still great, but then you get a shot like this where like it just feels simplified. Just, I feel like he's probably, I could be wrong, but I would assume he's laying down more details in the pencils. And old Kent Williams is just kind of doing a Vince Coletta job, right? We've talked about this on the Kirby reviews. So leaving stuff out and leaving details out. If I had to guess, I mean, it'd be nice to see the original pencil pages to compare. Maybe I'm wrong, and maybe this is just early Greg Capullo, and he's just not quite there yet with the level of detail, but again, it could be either or. I don't know for sure. But yeah, again, I definitely think this is like a very mundane, average comic and just has a few kind of interesting artistic moments. Case in point, the last page here, where Jack of Hearts has defeated Quasar, talks to this gentleman here. I'm not quite sure who this is. I recognize her as one of the Russian superheroes, kind of the Russian Avengers. And he calls this guy Sergey, so I'm going to assume that he's Russian or something, but I don't know exactly who that is. I really like this design though. Very Jack Kirby, continuing on the Jack Kirbiness with the Kirby crackle here. So to me, this is almost just the most interesting image in this comic because it's kind of Greg Capullo riffing or channeling Jack Kirby. Even the hand, I feel, is, you know, almost squared off fingers and inspired by Kirby. So for me, this was maybe the most kind of standout artistic moment in this whole issue. And that's where it ends as well. So we'll be continuing on next issue and finding out what's going on with this cosmic Kirby dude. This is fun to see. Miller Varley, Dead or Alive, she's back. Elektra lives again. Epic hardcover graphic novel. I didn't know it was that late in the game. I thought it was maybe late 80s, but it's actually from 1990, eh? So just like right before, you know, Frank Miller moves on to Dark Horse and starts Sin City. So still kind of having a full influence on mainstream comics with the recently done a few years ago Dark Knight Returns. And now he's kind of returning to Daredevil a bit with this Elektra stuff. So I have this. I guess I'll be reviewing it at some point, right? It is a great book, and artistically for Frank Miller, I think a high point as well. All right, guys, there's my short and sweet review of Quasar number 19. Hope you'll stick with me. I know once the inkers change, the art gets more interesting, and slowly but surely, I feel like the visuals will as well. And of course, you know, I just like the idea of looking at an artist early on in his career and seeing the improvements from this Quasar stuff to the stuff I know him more for. Spawn, and then later on in more modern times, Batman and all that. So I've got a ton of Greg Capullo to get through, and it'll be nice to see the evolution from Quasar to what he's doing today. So everyone out there, if you are subscribing and you're still watching, thank you so much. I really do appreciate it. If you're watching but you're not subscribed, please do so below. It only takes a quick second for you. Really helps the channel out, helps us grow, helps get us out there to our next goal of hitting 500 subscribers. That's the point at which YouTube starts to help us out a little bit with the algorithm and getting us out there to other people who are into comic books just like we are. So everyone, thanks again for watching. Have a great weekend and have an awesome day.
Like, subscribe, like, subscribe.
King Comics presents Big Baby, Volume 1, Issues 1 to 13, 204 pages of story and art. King Comics also presents Star Crasher one-shot, 32 pages, cosmic sci-fi surrealist adventure. You can find these fine comics at KingComics.CA, at MaximusRex13 on Instagram, or on Facebook, MaxRex or Big Baby.